So this is the last concept that we're going to learn in this session, which is the exchange rate. And probably something, so it's also super important for this course, but maybe something that maybe you have more or less an idea of what it is, but let's also kind of clarify it. And not for this concept, I will take some time because I want to explain from everything about the exchange rate, like the origin of the exchange rate and also the origin of money, because it's very, very related. And I will like talk about this with a story again, or like a history lecture, I think, because this is 100% real. All of this is true. And let's start this story with the background. But for the background, we need to go to the origins of humanity, to the first civilizations, because the first thing that I want to ask you is, which is the first type of money or this first kind of money thing that you know about? And probably that is exchanging things, right? Like I think in Mexico, we call it trueque from the Aztecs. It was very common to exchange things. So that was the first type of somehow doing exchanging goods or whatever, goods and services. So if I like your cow and you like my pig, we could exchange one cow for one pig. Maybe, I don't know, that can work out. And then even people will add more value to some things, right? Like maybe one cow was worth 10 chickens or something. It was all between exchanging things, right? And so which do you think was the most valuable good when people started trading things? First, I thought it was bacon because everyone likes bacon, but probably it wasn't bacon. I think the most popular good was gold, right? Everyone likes gold. Well, it makes sense a little bit because it's very useful. It's not that many gold in the world. It's difficult to get, and also everyone likes it. But I really don't like gold. The only gold thing that I have is my ring. But anyway, humans love gold, so love, sorry, gold became the most important good and service. So somehow gold became like money. If you had gold, you could buy anything, a cow or a chicken or bacon or whatever, or broccoli or something. So gold, everyone wanted to have gold. That is how the economy started, with gold. Actually, the first coins were made of gold and all of these things, gold, gold, gold. So in around the 15th century, uh, people realized that having gold was dangerous. I think they realized about that before, but it was becoming more and more dangerous because if you were rich, people would like to steal your gold. So what happened was that in Italy, and this started in Italy because Italy was in Italy at that time, it was more like small kingdoms fighting all the time, like the kingdom of Florence fighting the kingdom of Venice, and then all the time fighting, fighting, fighting. So like people in this area of Italy who owned like a small private army, they will say, I can keep the gold safe from you. I can keep it in my place. I have an army, so if someone wants to steal, I will kill them, and I will give you a piece of paper that says that you own this amount of gold, like maybe 10 kilograms of gold. So I give you the paper, and whenever you come back, I'll give you back your gold, and you pay me something. Okay, so that's how it worked, and people were happy with that. Rich people from Italy at that time were happy with that, and then they deposit their money. Also, the church deposit their money in there, and it worked out well. And then people, when imagine that you were a rich person who deposit the money in the bank, the gold, sorry, they deposit the gold in the bank, and then they got a piece of paper. And then when you wanted to buy something like a house, for example, you had to go to that place, give them the paper, and then they will give you the gold. And then you take your gold, and then you go and pay for the house, and then you get the house. But that was also dangerous, right? Like, it's like, sadly, but like in Mexico, when you go to the ATM, it's dangerous. You can get robbed or something, right? Like you need to be very careful, like especially if it's a lot of money. So the same happened in Italy. And then people say, it's dangerous to go, or maybe I'm too lazy to go and pick up the gold. Why don't you accept my paper? My paper says that I own 10 kilograms of gold and the house costs 10 kilograms of gold. Why don't I give you my paper and then I get my house and get your house? And then the other person will say, it makes sense. I trust the system. I trust that person who gives the money. I trust that paper that you actually have the money, and I accept. So probably it worked out like that at the beginning, but his historical analysis point out that these organizations were really important for the economy of Italy. So the government or the kingdoms at that time took care of them very carefully. Like if they didn't pay back the money, first of all, they were close to the walls of the cities, usually outside of the wall, because they wanted to trade. And then they had like a small table with a chair, and then they received the money or whatever, and then they made the deal in there. But if at some point they couldn't pay back the gold, then like the police or like the army of the city will go and break the table of that person, of that company who saved the money, and then they will kill the owner. So very drastic. That's why it worked. And when they broke the table, they called it in Italian bancarrota. So now you know what we're talking about. These guys who kept the money safe and gave them paper or that note in exchange of that gold, those were the first banks. And when they couldn't pay, it was bankruptcy, right? Like bancarrota. In Spanish, it's the same. I think in Italian, it's a bit different. So anyway, those were the first banks, because when that thing happened, when people started to trust on the paper and not actually only in the gold, it was the first time that money actually existed. Because before we had coins, but the coins were the metal. So it was the same thing. We had to see the gold because we were obsessed with gold, or we are, but we had to see the gold. And now we trust the paper. We trust that paper that said it is in there. And that system worked out for like 500 years, probably, or a little bit less. But that system, I remember when I was very young and I asked my grandmother how things work out. She explained me something like that, how money work out. She explained me something like that, like this bill or whatever, this note that I have represents some gold. But that's not true anymore. But for some time it was called the gold-based system. The money was backed by gold kept in the warehouse of the government or whatever. So governments, countries were obsessed on acquiring more gold. Since that happened in Italy, it expanded everywhere. The British Empire was one of the most successful empires on implementing the system everywhere. But it made sense for everyone. Like, we care about gold. This paper helps us to make things easier, but actually the paper has to be backed by gold, right? So every country decided to create their own bills or their own notes that we call money. Every country decided to create their own, like the British Empire had the British pounds, the Spanish Empire has, don't know how it was called, probably pesetas, but I don't know sure. The French Empire francs, and all of these different currencies, right? So the idea was that if I get more gold, I will become richer. Why? Because it was backed, that paper was backed by gold. So let me explain you how the first exchange rate system worked. How the economy made it work when, for example, a British person wanted to exchange his pound for another currency. So let me tell you an example. Imagine that you are a British person, you live in the UK, and your pound, 1 British pound represents 1 kilogram of gold, 1 and 1, right? 1 pound, 1 gold. For every pound that is in the market, there is 1 kilogram of gold somewhere in a warehouse in England. If there is 1 million pounds in the market, there is 1 million kilograms of gold. I'm just making up numbers, but imagine it is like that. So 1 pound, 1 gold. And that person wants to exchange £1 for $1. Let's assume it's $1, $1 American. So they had to do this calculation of the $1 £1 equals to $1. They had to do it the same way, but with the dollar. How many gold does $1? How much gold does $1 represent? So probably because at that time, the most expensive currency in the 1800s, it was the most expensive, the pound, because the British Empire was the most powerful. Maybe it was that in the US, it wasn't that good. Maybe, or let's assume that $1 equals 1 gold, 1 kilogram of gold, $1, 1 gold, and the British pound is 1 pound, 2 golds, right? 2 kilograms of gold. So let me see if I can write here in the presentation just to make it easier. So $1, 1 US dollar equals 1 gold, right? 1. Looks so bad. 1 gold. And 1 British pound equals 2 kilograms of gold, because British Empire was very powerful. So if you wanted to exchange 1 pound for dollars, how many dollars do you think you will get if everything is fair? You will get $2, right? Does it make sense? You need $2 because $1 represents 1 gold. And if 1 British pound represents 2 gold, of course you need $2. I hope it is clear because this is the most basic system that we had. So in that case, the exchange rate was $2 for each pound, like this. $2 for each British pound. It was the first exchange rate. So then people could trade. Okay, I will pay you $2 for 1 pound. That's fine. I'm happy. You are happy. Everyone's happy. Blah, blah. That's the end of the story. And this system worked well for, as I told you, maybe centuries. It was a system that looked fair, but the system was very cruel because countries, people, and everyone was obsessed with getting gold. That's why when they conquered Americas and when they conquered Asia and Africa, they just focused on getting gold from there and getting more and more and more gold. So it was very bad for humanity because there were many wars. There was always people fighting for gold, until after the Industrial Revolution, people realized that there were other ways to become richer rather than just stealing and conquering and killing. There were other ways where you could become richer. So what happened was that, let's keep this same example. Imagine that you are, imagine that the Americans, in the US, they, imagine that they found, sorry, I have to do it the other way around. The British, it will become simpler. Imagine in this example, when the exchange rate is $2 per pound, imagine that the British found a cure for an illness that was very bad at that time. I don't know, maybe they found a cure for, I don't know, very bad illness. So everyone in the world wants to buy that medicine, right? So even Americans. So imagine it's the first time that they start selling that medicine, and they say, okay, we are going to sell this medicine, each tablet at £1. That's the price for this medicine. £1 per medicine. And who wants to buy this? So everyone wants to buy this medicine because it will save lives and all of this. So people will be crazy for buying pounds. Everyone will like to buy pounds, everyone in the world. All the Americans will like to buy pounds, so then they can buy the medicine. So what will happen is that the bank, the bank in the US, in the UK, will say, I don't have enough pounds for everyone. Maybe there is 100 people who wants to buy pounds and I only have 50 pounds. So what I will do is that I will increase the price. Instead of 2, it will be 3. And people will say, that's unfair because you don't have enough gold. You only have gold, 2 of gold. That would be fair if you have 3 gold per pound. But the bank will say, I don't care. That's the price. I don't have enough or at the price of 2, so I increase at 3. Who wants to pay? If you don't want, leave. So maybe at 3, maybe half of the people will leave, and in the end, only half of them will stay and they will pay 3 and they are happy with their medicine and all of this. And then this was like a, like a big bang in the minds of the economists of that time, and even governments and everyone. It was like, whoa, we can become rich without killing people. We can actually become rich if we have things that people like, or that people would like that people will be interested on getting. Like, for example, tourism. If people want to come to our country, then we will become richer because people want to consume our products. If we advance technology, if we do nice things, people will like us, and we don't have to kill anyone. We can just be richer like that. So then they thought it was a good idea, especially economists, some of them. But what happened in practice was completely the opposite. We thought we found a good thing, but we can't have good things all the time. And what happened was that we had the First World War, and then, well, first of all, the trade decreased because we had a huge war. Then we also had a huge financial crisis. Everyone was very poor. We also had nationalistic movements where people wouldn't want, it's a little bit of what's happening now, right? Like, oh, we don't want to, we are locals and we are so national and we don't care about anything else and we don't do trade, blah, 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 all of these things. And then trade declined. There was no urge to do this. And then World War II, so even worse, a lot of people dying, a lot of financial crisis again. But as a little bit before the end of the war, 1944, the 3 countries that were winning at that time, or 3 minus 3 and Russia, but only 3 met, France, the UK, and the US. They met near Boston in a place called Bretton Woods. And then they said, this thing with the gold is very problematic. We have had wars and wars all over history because we want to have more gold. It is very problematic. You know what we should do? That instead of kind of base or economy on the gold, like in here, like when we have the currency per gold, we are going to forget about gold. We are going to forget about this. We don't care about gold. But you know what we will care about? We will care about dollars. So now in 1944, the 3 countries, well, partly because the US was the big country in there, they said, let's forget about gold. We are going to focus only in dollars. So we are going to do this calculation, but based on the amount of dollars that you have, and that will be the base exchange rate. And from then on, it will move freely in terms of supply and demand. If your country becomes more interesting, people will buy more, people will buy less. Sometime in between, we redo the calculation based on how many dollars you have. If there is a need to recalculate, we recalculate, and then we set a new rate, and then we do the same thing. So all the other countries in the world will be tied to the dollar. Only the dollar will still be backed by gold, only the dollar, because it was kind of an indirect thing. Like if the US dollar was backed by gold, all the other currencies could be backed by only dollars. So then they said, okay, it made sense, and we will create 2 very important institutions, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. That's what they also did in 1944. And then they say, if these 2 institutions are going to shape the future of the economy in the world, because after the war, everyone is going to be poor, and we need to help everyone, because otherwise we'll have another war. So what we are going to do is that we are going to create these 2 things, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The World Bank, the objective of the World Bank is to help to reduce poverty. So any project that focuses on reducing poverty can receive money from the World Bank. That is one institution. And the other one is the International Monetary Fund. This fund is also a fund funded mostly by the US, but also their friends. And this fund focuses on helping countries that can't get money from other countries, like, for example, Germany. Who will lend money to Germany after the war? Probably no one. So the International Monetary Fund will lend money to them. Also, what happened later on is that a lot of countries went into crisis and no one will lend them money because they didn't pay back their loans, and they will do the International Monetary Fund. But the rules of the fund is that if you are so desperate that you need my money, then you have to obey whatever I say. So you will have to open trade. It's like you will obey everything that I say. So through these two institutions, through these two institutions plus other mechanisms that they use, especially the US, made this system work in the world. People it has bright and dark sides. People criticize it because they think like it was like an imposition, and also because the dollar was the most important thing in the world because of this. And people are critical because they say, why the dollar, why the US, and blah blah. That's kind of the downside. The positive side is that it kind of worked out well. Like some countries improved, especially Germany and Japan, for example, even Italy, like the losing countries, the big losers from the war, improved through these systems. And we didn't have a big war after that, hopefully not soon, but we haven't had a war almost in 100 years. So also a positive thing. There is always positive and negative things. It's up to you how you judge in the end. But that's how it worked after that. So from here on, what my grandmothers told me, that every peso was backed by gold, didn't work anymore from 1944. Probably my grandmother studied before this, and that's why she told what she learned before, or I don't know, or maybe she had no idea. But from 1944, the gold-based system stopped. And in 1973, that's another thing. Like, I think like sometimes the market, it's like karma, but the market will punish you if you do something very bad or very unfair. Because what happened in 1973 was that everyone was obsessed with having dollars, right? So every country, as soon as they improved, they were just buying and buying and buying dollars. So that was good for the US because everyone wanted their currency and they were very rich. But at some point, it was not possible to supply the demand for dollars. Like 1970s, Japan was very powerful, Germany was very powerful and rich, the UK also, France as well. So everyone was demanding dollars and they didn't have enough money. So then 1973, they said, you know what, we don't care. We are going to drop this idea of backing your currency with dollars. We don't care. We are not going to back our currency in gold because we can't handle it anymore. So now no one cares about backing anything. It's only supply and demand. If you are more interesting and people are willing to pay more, or if you are boring and people don't want to buy your currency, is your problem. Dollar is not fixed to anything. Do whatever you want. That's what happened in 1973. So that's the system that we have right now, where we don't back our currencies on dollars or gold or anything. It is only supply and demand. And after that, it was like a huge mess. Like countries were like, oh my God, what's going on? We don't have any reference. We don't have a benchmark. We used to have dollars, but now dollars are not that important. So what are we going to do? And then people were so confused. And then some countries said, let's take the most extreme answer to this and let's make everything free. The market will decide whatever happens. If we are cool and we are interesting, people will like our currency, will become rich. That's our plan. And other countries did the opposite. They said that's too dangerous. We have to fix it. The government has to fix the rate. We will calculate the rate. We are going to control everything, that was the other extreme. For example, in Mexico, we went for the extreme of controlling everything. And in the case of Southern Asia, like, for example, Singapore, Malaysia, these countries, Taiwan, they did the opposite. They decided to do it totally free. And what happened with both countries? Both fell miserably and drastically. Well, 1997, 1994 for Mexico, but 1997 for Asia. Huge economic crisis. I will tell you the story about Mexico first, and maybe you know it. Every 6 years, when the president changed and it was the same party, they recalculated the exchange rate. And every time they recalculated, it was worse, but drastically worse, the exchange rate, because the government was not capable of keeping the economy competitive. And maybe 6 years after the first calculation, the economy was much worse, the country was much worse. So every 6 years was a huge hit on the exchange rate. It was until 1994, when the last big economic crisis happened, that they decided to change the system, leave control. We're going to learn about that in the next session. And then the Asian case is the opposite. In the Asian case, they were free and they were okay with that. And then they were becoming rich because they were very competitive. They were calling the Asian miracle. They were very rich. They were very happy. A lot of investment, all of this. But then they one day, all the currency left the country because there were some things that happened, like some mini crisis, and also people just wanted to left and there was not enough control. So from one day to the other, all the Asian economies went to a huge crisis because they didn't have control. So both extremes didn't work. And from that moment, we realized that extremes might not be the answer. And also we realized that there is not one way on which the system will work. I think the US realized about it in 73, but the whole world realized until late 90s. There is not one single way to handle this. There is not one simple answer, universal answer on how things are going to work. It's more like every country has to be conscious about how they need to handle their exchange rate system. So from, I think, 2000, the International Monetary Fund has accepted at least 10 different systems of the exchange rate that work. In the next class, we're going to learn about them because that's what happens now. So I hope that after this big, long story, almost half an hour, you are now more aware of what is the current exchange rate system, that we're going to learn more about that in the next session, but also the whole history. And maybe I could also clarify some myths about this gold thing, and also about how bad it was for humanity before, and then how it evolved, and then how this dollar thing occurred, and how the market made it change. So I hope you liked the story. Hope it wasn't that long. And then I will finish the video here. I think I will just only explain the homework in another video, and that's it for this session.